Yeah, so take us 17 years ago, who would have an idea to bring beauty online? I mean, we take it for granted now, but
sure.
I'm assuming back then people probably looked at you like you were fairly crazy.
Fairly crazy, yeah. Look, so my uni job was actually working on the Clarins counter in department stores, which I loved. I thought it was the best thing ever. I'd been a beauty junkie since I was in high school, and one of the things that I really noticed when I explained to other people at uni what I did for my job, everybody would kind of pull this face and talk about how horrible they found department stores, and they're going to go and upsell you stuff, and people would come home with things that are like, oh, how did I end up with all of this? And that people really found it kind of an intimidating and disempowering experience and really unpleasant. And to me, that was just really sad and depressing, because I wanted people to feel the same way about beauty that I did, in the sense that, when you do it right, it can, give you great confidence, and you feel, you kind of feel your best self when you've got good hair going on, you've got a good lippy, and, you're ready for the day. But the shopping experience was making people feel completely the opposite. And it was around that time, like I didn't get to really start using the internet until I was at uni, and I went and started looking up beauty websites, because when you're a beauty junkie, that's what you do, and there was nothing in Australia. And I thought, somebody's going to start a beauty website, and it's going to be fantastic, and they should have this and they should have that. And I'd started kind of sketching out the whole thing in my head, and kind of talked about it to all my friends incessantly. And it wasn't until my boyfriend said, look, are you going to do this thing or what? I went, oh. I literally never considered starting my own business until that moment. So I decided I was going to start Australia's first beauty website, and I was 21, and I had no business experience, and I had no money and no connections whatsoever.
And do you think that if you knew what you knew now, would you have gone back and done it?
I think there were great benefits in being completely clueless, because I had no idea of what I was in for, and that was at the time probably a good thing, because if you knew everything, you would never do it. You would never do it.
So one thing you mentioned when we were chatting, you've been around for 17 years, and it was a hard slog, and all of a sudden you're seeing this big surge in growth at the moment. Do you want to talk to what's actually starting to happen that's making you see, and what have you done to kind of elevate things?
Sure. So for us, it was really interesting listening to Aris's presentation with the factors and timing being the most important one. And timing was the thing that we didn't have at the start. Too soon, way too soon. Australian consumers weren't ready for it, and the beauty industry definitely was not ready for it. So pretty much every brand I approached was like, no way, nobody's ever going to buy beauty products on the internet. This is not going to happen. Please go away now. And so it was, for at least the first 10 years, a really, really slow and laborious process of, without any funding, trying one by one to get these brands to come on board so that we had the products that consumers wanted. And then at the same time, trying to convince consumers that the internet wasn't dodgy, and that nothing bad would happen if you put your credit card details on. Like, that's how early it was, where people would freak out about putting their credit card on the internet. So the timing was definitely not there. So that was like a good 10-year slog, I think, through that. And then around sort of 2010, 2011, we started to get a little bit of an upswing, but then it sort of leveled off after a couple of years, and it became much harder to get that growth, and went through this process of strategic planning with the help of a business coach, who said to me, look, what I want you to do is to go home and write a letter to yourself from 10 years in the future, and explain everything about how your business looks, and everything, go into detail. How big is it? How many staff have you got? What sort of products do you sell? All that kind of thing. What's your role in it? Are you still in it? Did you sell it already? All that kind of stuff. And that for me was really kind of like just turning all the lights back on. And then I had a really clear vision of what needed to be done. And so for the next 3 years, tripled the size of the business by reinventing the website, so had to completely re-platform, finally start investing some money in marketing, go really hard to get the brands that we didn't have, but then also take a few risks with margins. So that was switching to offering free shipping across the board, which we did in middle of 2012, and implementing a price match policy. But the scary part about all of that sort of stuff was all of that cost money, and we didn't have any money. So, we had to do a capital raise, and we ended up with Woolworths as a shareholder for a couple of years, and that also enabled us to triple the size of the business in those 2 years. And what that was about was really, it was investing in stock, was investing in people, it was investing in marketing. So the things that you normally can't do when you're bootstrapped, because they're going to cost you money now, but you're not going to see the benefits for another 6 or 12 months. You cannot do those things when you're trying to run your business just off of cash flow. So being able to invest in all of those things is now bringing the growth that we're getting right now, because we've waited 17 years kind of positioning ourselves to be ready for the wave, and now the wave's come, and it looks like all of a sudden we've just taken off out of nowhere, but it's 17 years of paddling to get into the right spot. Yeah, exactly.
So let's chat about funding a little bit, because I know you mentioned to me that you have some regrets about not bringing funding on earlier, and then you have an interesting story in that you landed up buying back your shares from Woolworths.
Sure. Yes. So look, I think certainly at the start of my business, and Cyan echoed this morning, I had no idea that funding was even a thing that you could go and get. Like, I assumed that if the banks knocked you back, that was it. You just had to try and find your way forward on your own, or beg and borrow from your family, and my family were not wealthy or well connected, so that was a bust. So really all the capital we had to start with was $12,000 from my boyfriend's dad, and that was a loan. And he probably should have gone for equity, but never mind. We paid him back, so that was all good.
He's still on speaking terms, so.
Yeah, he's passed away actually, so he didn't get to see the end, but which is a shame, because he would have loved it. So that was completely bootstrapped up until bringing Woolies on as a shareholder, which was the end of December 2014. And look, I think, I was very reticent to go down the capital raising path. It was sort of, probably a bit of that imposter syndrome thing. Oh, who am I to go and walk up and, ask someone for millions of dollars? And so that was a bit terrifying for me. So probably a little bit of it was a confidence thing. And also too, you've been running your own business for that long. Giving, a little part of it over to somebody else is sort of a bit terrifying. But I thought, well, look, we're holding ourselves back now. I think the thing I didn't anticipate was how long it was going to take to get the money. So I probably didn't start raising until we needed the money, which of course is way too late. You got to start it kind of 12 months before you're going to need it, because that's, there's quite a long lead time, and particularly if you're talking to any sort of strategic investors that are not set up to do deals quickly, very, very long and time consuming. And then, look, the partnership with Woolies was great. I mean, we got to work with fantastic people. There were, other resources there that we could leverage off. I mean, they're the biggest online retailer in the country, so plenty of smart people for me to talk to. That there was no way I could afford to employ anybody like that, but they would all let me go and, pick their brains for free, so that was pretty neat. And I think, look, just sort of after, after maybe a year or so, 18 months, we just sort of started to see a few things that made us think, look, I don't know whether strategically we're really aligned anymore. The paths are kind of diverging a little bit. And when you have a strategic investor as opposed to just, VC money, it can be quite restrictive. They don't, kind of play well with others, and it locks. There are a lot of people who won't or can't work with you because this other partner is involved, and we just thought, look, as a long-term thing, I don't think this is going to go where we'd all originally planned it was going to. So let's call it quits and we'll buy back the shares and, you know, consciously uncouple, as it were.
I guess that could be quite a common thing though. A lot of Australian startups, particularly, you know, when there was less and less funding around, did go for corporate partnerships.
Yeah.
When you're dealing with large corporations, how does that grade against the kind of startup mentality? Was that challenging?
No, look, it wasn't, because they were very careful that it didn't and wouldn't. You know, smart corporates that do those sorts of deals, you know, are very careful to try and not heap too much of their kind of bureaucracy on top of you, because they don't want to slow you down. I mean, they've just invested in the thing that you can do that they can't do. Why would they do that and then squash it? You know, so, but yes, it does happen, and I've seen it happen elsewhere, and obviously that's the big thing to be concerned about, and that was something that I was very concerned about. But no, that didn't happen. I think, yeah, the only frustrating thing for me sometimes was just the time things would take in the process, and then if, you know, so much, even in a huge company like that has so many systems. Sometimes if you know, the person you had been dealing with was moved on to somewhere else, so you'd kind of almost have to start again from scratch. Which I was kind of used to be honest, because we do work with a lot of huge global corporates, you know, with our suppliers, L'Oreal and Estee Lauder and those sorts of businesses. So I was familiar with the way that all of that stuff works. So it wasn't too much of a surprise for me. But yeah, look, I'd consider the whole thing on the whole to have been very positive. It wasn't like it was terrible.
So one of the things that I guess everyone always wants to ask you about, and Cyan alluded to this, is you deal with physical product, and that involves a lot of logistics.
It does.
So how do you do it?
Wasn't something I really even thought about much at the start. Like, I literally just put the stock in kind of big tubs under my bed. That's where it was. And then I would, you know, when someone ordered something, I would like pull it out and wrap it up in tissue paper and stick it in a box and trundle down to the post office to post it. And that was, you know, that was kind of the extent of my plans for our logistics in the beginning. Obviously, it's had to evolve considerably, and the challenge is always, I guess, trying to make sure, because it's really expensive, all of that stuff. Investing in logistics is expensive. The software is expensive. I mean, here's a great idea for a disruptive startup, is to start doing, you know, warehouse supplies that are some kind of reasonable price. It is absolutely obscene what people will try and charge for like a picking tub that's got dividers in it. It's ridiculous, you know, because it's specialised equipment. So the challenge, I think, is to invest the right amount at the right time, so that you're not completely, you know, burdening yourself with these huge costs at a time when you don't need it. And that was kind of what happened very early in our industry. David Jones went hard into e-commerce at the start and invested huge amounts of money in logistics when the market wasn't ready. And so they over-invested, made enormous losses, in the end just pulled the whole thing. So we had to kind of do it bit by bit. And so you're always trying to build up to, okay, where do I need to get to in the next 12 months? Right, well, I'll do that now. Because it's just ridiculously expensive. So
you have your own factory, you don't rely on third parties to do supplying?
No, we don't. The reason we don't do that, I think, having drop shipping is tremendously risky for any sort of business where you're prioritising the customer experience. And let's face it, every e-commerce business has got to be prioritising the customer experience, because we've got, for instance, 70, 80 odd different suppliers. And to trust every single one of them with our end-to-end customer experience, I mean, it always comes down to the lowest common denominator. You know, somebody in Perth who decides that they can, you know, they'll ship your order tomorrow or maybe the next day. I mean, we've got to shield our customers from that, which is why it's quite important that we, you know, control that experience. 3PL for B2C wasn't really around the time when we were kind of building up, and even now, like, it's something that I'd still think about sometimes. It would, you know, sometimes trying to worry about, you know, how is my warehouse going to cope with Christmas, and particularly at the moment, you know, that can be really challenging. You think, gosh, you know, gee, it would be nice if I didn't have to worry about that. But again, the whole idea of trusting somebody else with that, because, you know, at least half of the customer experience is when that order gets delivered to their door and they open up the box. Are the right products in there? Is even the corner of your lipstick box a little bit dented? Is there the right gift with purchase in there? Are the right brochures in there? Are the right samples in there? You know, I'm really loath to kind of trust somebody else with it. It's so important.
And I guess in your space there have been some very public, big competitors come on board, like Sephora, Mecca. How do you deal with that? You know, do you think you have an advantage being the local company? You know, what's your approach to kind of competitors?
Well, look, usually my approach is to get completely terrified and go into kind of a panic spiral for a few days. And then, you know, sort of breathe into a paper bag and come out and go, well, wait a minute, we've still got customers that like us. We still do a good job of what we do. We don't, you know, we have interesting brands that not everybody else has, and particularly, you know, brand selection has been really one of our key strengths, and that's the thing that it's taken 17 years to build up. You know, you can't just walk in and be able to get supply from, you know, from all of those different suppliers. It is a one by one convincing, you know, these huge global brands to trust you with the most important thing they have. You know, that trust takes a really long time to build up. So you do have to remember that, yes, somebody bigger is coming in, but what we've built is not nothing. And if we keep focusing on the customer and relentlessly every day try and think, okay, what can I give my customers that no one else is going to bother to do for them? Look, it's kept us ahead so far. I mean, since Sephora came in 3 years ago, the business was increased by 4 times. So I don't know. Look, it hasn't been bad for us so far. No, look, but you can't get complacent about it either. I actually always find it quite an energising experience. You know, you go through the paralysing terror and then you come out and you go, right, how are we going to get them? And it's not a bad thing. Competition makes you better.
So 17 years, that's a long time. Can you talk to us about, you know, persistence through that? And you sit here and you look so calm and very glamorous.
Yeah.
Tell us about some of the really the hard days. I mean, you make it look easy.
Yeah. Look, let me paint you a picture. At least the first couple of years, it was literally just me at home in my garage wearing fingerless gloves because it was freezing with my cat for company, and I was so poor. I was living off of AusStudy, and that paid for my rent and mee goreng packet noodles, and that was pretty much it. Like, I did not buy clothes for 3 years, probably. I would just kind of beg every birthday and Christmas from my parents. It's like, please buy me some clothing. I have holes in everything. So that was difficult to turn up and look professional when you were sort of going back to your garage every day and, you know, crying into your baked beans. I think the thing that kept me going is that, for starters, it was something that I really believed in and that I really cared about. I kind of felt like the way that the beauty industry was approaching women was in a way where they were trying to get money out of them by making them feel bad about themselves, and I thought that was such a lousy way of doing things and so not customer friendly. And I don't think I could have even enunciated that to you at that time, but it was something that you just kind of, you know, feel in your gut somehow. It's like, this way, you know, this way of doing things is not right. And to get also to, even though I was, you know, getting drip fed customers, I was getting maybe 5 orders a day, those customers would send me the loveliest emails and say, you know, this is brilliant. This is my first order from you. I'd never ordered anything on the internet before. This is amazing. If you could please just get brands X, Y, and Z, I never have to go into David Jones again, and that would make me so happy. And so it's, you know, you get just kind of little bits of positive feedback along the way, and that's what keeps you going. And then, you know, you live that way for, I don't know, 10 years, and then all of a sudden someone gives you like a Telstra Businesswoman of the Year award, and then you just completely flip out because I've never had that much positive reinforcement in my life. So it's, yeah, I think the persistence only happens if you're doing something that you care about. And I'm sure that probably every single founder in the room would be able to tell you that if you're only in it for the money, you know, go be a lawyer or something. Like, there are so many easier and less, well, slightly less soul-destroying ways, like to make a buck. It can't be about the money for you, because you will never survive through all of the rejection and all of the people telling you you're an idiot. I apologise if some of you guys have heard this story before, but one of the brands that I approached in the very, very early days, it would have been the first year, responded by faxing me a letter, because not everybody had email, so it was like a thermal paper fax. And it was a 14-page fax, and the first page was a letter, and I still have it, is a letter saying, this is a ridiculous idea, you've actually offended us by even daring to approach us. And the next 13 pages were thumbnails of magazine covers that their products had been featured in. You're a 21-year-old,
yeah.
You've got stuff like that coming at you. I don't know, you cry a little bit and then you go on, don't you?
How do you recover? If someone said that to me and I was 21, I'd probably be like, okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm really stubborn, and I was convinced that this would be right and that they were wrong, and I knew it from all of the potential customers and all of the women that I've spoken to. Yes, it is devastating when someone that, people who are sort of industry leaders tell you you're an idiot. That's tough, but I guess if you believe in what you're doing, I don't know, you just keep plugging away. Pick yourself up and put one foot in front of the other again for a while.
Great. I think we've got some questions from the audience.
Heaps of questions from the audience, but I have to be very selfish and ask a question first of my own, which is, and it's actually getting a lot of chatter on Twitter, is your letter to yourself, the 10-year letter.
Yeah.
Have you achieved your 10-year letter?
Yes, we achieved it in about 5 years. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So we've got a lot of questions here. A lot of them are going to competition, and the way you've touched a little bit on that, but could you tease that out a little bit more, because it's obviously spurred a lot of conversation. Specific questions are coming through about what have you done to really address the competition, and also how are you keeping your brands loyal to prevent them jumping across to other platforms?
Okay, so for the first one, it really, how you approach competition to some extent involves, yes, keeping an eye on what other people are doing, but also keeping very focused on what you're doing, and you got to play your own game. So for us, that's all about knowing what our vision is, and that is really about empowering the women that shop from us and helping them make better decisions, so that basically nobody has a cosmetic graveyard under their bathroom sink anymore of things that they've wasted their money on. And so everything that we do is not about looking at the competition, but going, right, how can we do that better? Because if we can do that better, then whatever the competition is doing is irrelevant, because this will be the best way for people to shop. And there's many things that you do around that, and sometimes it's around brand selection, and sometimes it's around how you communicate and your voice and your brand and the things that you talk about. Sometimes it's about, the technology and the things that you decide to focus on with your technology platform. And yeah, that whole sort of personalised and curated approach is something that we're investing a lot in. In terms of, what was the second part?
Brand loyalty.
Brand loyalty,
yeah.
Look, that's all about relationships, and you can't make people be loyal, but what you can do is try and create a situation that works really well for the brand, because they're making great sales, and also works really well for the customer. So the brands and the customers are, they're sort of our two biggest stakeholders, and if we can connect them right, connect the right brand with the right customer, everybody wins. Nobody wastes their money on, lousy magazine advertising. So that's, and it's continuing to foster those relationships all of the time. I mean, from when we go and talk to our brands, they'll quite often say, wow, nobody does this for us. This is fantastic, presenting a report on all of the things that, we've been trying with other different brands that they might want to try. Having dedicated relationship managers that kind of look beyond, how can we push our margins, how can we, you know, get better rebates. It's got to be more about how do we both build long-term value together.
And so the more questions that are coming through are, how did you go about attracting those first brands in the first year? And did you ever think about creating your own in-house brand?
To get the first brands, I pretty much just had to go with the only two that would take my money. Everybody else was a no, so it was 2 teeny brands, neither of which exist anymore, but that was just enough to get the site built, and then to go back to all of the other ones that had said no and said, look, here, I've actually built it, this is what it is, and then 5 more said yes. And then you've got 7, and then you can go back to everybody else again, and it's pretty much that rinse and repeat for the next 17 years. You know, and again, a lot of relationship building and taking a very long-term view of things. In terms of having our own brand, look, I wouldn't rule it out. It's not like in groceries where people will just look for the cheapest version of caster sugar. Cosmetics is something where people feel very personally connected to brand, and I don't think until now we had that kind of, you know, like a strong enough relationship or that relationship at scale to make that work. I wouldn't rule it out.
And we've had a few questions coming in on diversity, which a lot of our guests have been asked about today. And in particular, Sayante this morning spoke about imposter syndrome.
Oh yeah.
Have you ever encountered that in your journey?
Daily. Yeah, no, everybody has it. That's what the thing that I've realised is that everybody has it. Nobody, yeah. I've realised that, is that even all of the people that you think, wow, you know, you're so successful, you know, you must feel confident all of the time. Nobody feels confident all the time. And if you're not doing things that terrify you on a daily basis, then you're probably not pushing yourself hard enough. So yes, regularly, all the time.
And my final question, and I apologise, we're not going to get through them all, goes to women in leadership.
Sure.
And how do you look at the business community broadly in Australia and also the startup ecosystem in terms of leadership by women?
Look, this is something that I feel very strongly about. And yeah, I feel that many of the systems that are in place really limit the opportunities for women in leadership. I guess one of the things that I'm trying to create at Adore is a working environment that does facilitate women getting up into leadership positions. I mean, we've just promoted someone to like a general manager of operations who, you know, has worked her way up from a buyer's role. And she's amazing, and she said, look, I want to do this role part-time. I want to do it 4 days because she's got really young kids and she wanted to have at least 1 day at home. And my first thought was, oh no, this is a full-time role. And then, you know, I had to kind of check myself and went, well, wait a minute, you know, practice what you preach here, and said, rightio, well, okay, well, let's try it. Why not? Why not? You know, let's introduce flexibility into all jobs. And let's do it for men and for women, because that's a really important thing. I mean, it's no good to have flexibility just for women. I mean, we have to allow our male executives as well to also, if they want to work a couple of days from home so that they can see a bit more of their kids, well, you know, that's what helps their wives go into, you know, positions of leadership. So it's something that we all have to be really conscious of all of the time and really challenge our ideas of what merit is. I think too, the other thing is that the approach is not to fix women. You know, it's not about leaning in more. You know, we can't lean in anymore. We're leaning in the most. We're like this. You know, it's not about fixing women. It's about fixing the systems that don't allow all of the great things that women contribute, don't allow those things to be seen or don't allow those things to be recognised. So, yeah, I mean, as far as the startup scene in Australia goes, I think it's much better than what I've seen in the States. And I went over to a tech conference over there earlier in the year and was really shocked at how few female speakers they had, and actually kind of got into a fight with them about it on Twitter, and that was a thing. And, you know, it's to try and make them see that this is not just about being fair. I mean, I said to them, you know, tell me, okay, they said, oh no, we're working really hard on this. And I said, okay, you know, tell me what your goals are, what you're trying to achieve. And they said, oh, well, we've got to prioritise the content first. And I thought, well, that's offensive, isn't it? Because, you know, we all of a sudden started putting these women in there, then maybe the content would suffer. And I just, I feel like we're further ahead here than there is in some other markets. It's still a long way to go.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Kate. And can you please join me in thanking Kate for the session, and also Bronwyn.